Hi everyone, welcome back to Feather Stitch House. My name's Rebecca and each week on this channel I upload videos about embroidery and textile art to help you get creative. Each year we complete a 52-week project called Winging It, and this year our project is taking the form of a fabric journal. Each month we're creating a complete piece of textile art that reflects something that's happening in our lives or in the world around us as we move through 2024. Last week we started our June panel and we worked on our background, taking inspiration from the summer solstice, which will be happening in about 10 days' time, and the planetary parade that happened on the 3rd of June. Now, you might have been thinking, how is this relevant to my life? And if you've been watching my videos for a while, you will know that there's always a way. So what I thought we'd do is take inspiration from the fact that those planets were all in alignment, and we're going to start thinking about how to bring some alignment in our own lives. So we're going to look at the symbolic characters that gave their names to the planets and think about certain aspects of our lives that we might want to bring into alignment or into some balance. So you're going to need some scraps of fabric, some tiny scraps of wadding, or something padded felt would do if you don't have wadding, and some embroidery threads obviously, and a little bit later on you might also need a paper and pen. So gather all your bits and pieces and let's get stitching. Okay, so this is where we left things last week. We made our background by doing some double cutting so that we could switch out shapes from one fabric to another. So we made our summer solstice background that is roughly 70% light and 30% dark to reflect the proportions of light to dark on the solstice on the 20th of June, and we created some ellipses in stitch to represent the orbit of the planet. So if you remember, we're basing this piece on what's happening in the night sky during June, which includes a planetary parade of 6 planets. So what we're going to do today is work on making our planet, and we could just do this with some applique and some stitching, but I wanted to do something a little bit more meaningful for us because most of us won't have seen it. So how are we going to make this meaningful to us? What I've done on a piece of paper, it's quite faint this, so I hope you can see it. I've marked out the shape of my panel. All I wanted was the height of it because I wanted to make sure that I could get 6 planets in a row down the length of my panel. And so this is the sizing that I've decided on. These are not to scale. If they were to scale, Jupiter would have to be like the size of a beach ball compared to Mars being that size. So we're just roughly doing some different sizes. So let's have a look. My Jupiter circle is about 5 centimeters in diameter. This is just rough sizing. Mars is about 3.2 centimeters. Mercury is about 3 centimeters. Uranus is about 4. Neptune 3.5, and Saturn close to 3. But I've also, with Saturn, just put an oval over the top because we're going to put rings around that one. So I'm going to use these as templates first of all, and we're only going to do the first 3 today. So let's cut those out. These weren't in order, by the way. I have written a list of the right order. So Jupiter comes first. When you're cutting a circle, move the shape, not the scissors. So hopefully you can see my scissors are staying still. I'm just slowly closing them and I'm turning the paper in the scissors. and that gives you much more control over the shape. So what you should do is cut beyond your starting point, and that will give you a nice rounded shape. So this is not the order that they appear in the solar system. This is the order that they appeared in the sky, from lowest to the horizon up. So we need Jupiter, Mercury and Uranus for our first batch. What we're going to do is just work out where on our panel, I think I might go over. I don't want to cover up that lovely sort of combination. Maybe I could go diagonally, in which case I'm going to need them all. Bear with me, I'm going to cut the rest out. So let's play around with layout, because this is quite helpful actually, because they are going to be opaque. We're using fabrics, so I want to make sure that they all go on without covering over all the stitches. If I do them on the diagonal like that, maybe make Saturn a little bit bigger, maybe not quite that big, but maybe Neptune sized, that kind of thing. So I think I'm kind of happy with that, and the reason I want to keep them roughly in a straight line is because that's the way they appeared in the sky. That's why it's a planetary parade. So let's go like that, and I'm just going to let's do it in heater rays, because if I iron it, I think I probably won't need to iron the actual panel until the end. So I need my white as well. So that's my placement, and so I'm going to take that out of the way for the time being, because we're going to do something a bit different. Right, so what I've got here is some canvas. So this is a heavyweight cotton, and I'm going to start by making a shape. So we're starting with Jupiter, and I want to just draw around. I don't want to go right up to the edge of the fabric. I want to give myself the opportunity to turn it under if needs be. So we're going to start with Jupiter. We're going to make all these planets the same way, because we're going to make some little pockets to put on our background. Just going to cut it out with a little border there. These are going to attach to the fabric, and we're going to make a second layer, a bit narrow there, that sits on the top of it. So Jupiter goes first, might as well write it on, and Mercury comes second, and Uranus comes third, and it won't fit on. I just cut off a little tab there that had. Maybe you're all shouting at me, so it's not going to be big enough. If you were, I'm really sorry. Let's get another little bit. I'm sure there's another tab sticking out somewhere. Uranus, let's just go around that. So we're just going to do this first three, and next week we'll do the other three, and then in week 4 we'll do something else. I'm going to add some detail to the background. So I thought it might be nice to look at some symbolic meaning. We I think, really enjoyed our symbolic doorway last month, and judging by your comments on below the videos and on Instagram and on Facebook, in the Facebook group, you really loved doing something so meaningful. So I thought we'd carry on, because this is a journal, this is sort of reflecting our year, and I thought we'd carry on with this sort of symbolic making that we're doing. So let's start with Jupiter. And if you look on the NASA website, you can see the actual colours. So I think it is either Hubble or one of the other probes that's going out through the solar system, taking pictures of things as it flies by. And it has flown past Jupiter, and it's possible to see actual real sort of unenhanced pictures of the planet. And so we're going to go with the realistic colours of the planet. And Jupiter is shades of yellow, orange, red and white. And I was looking through my stash. Orange is not a colour I use a lot, and if you've been around for a while, you'll know that I'm a little bit low on yellows as well. But I stumbled across this little bit of fabric, and me and my daughter did some tie-dyeing a while ago, and I just experimented. This was the sort of bag that was a pillow, and I'd used all the filling out of the pillow once it wasn't useful as a pillow anymore, and was left with this bag and didn't want to waste it, so I thought I'd try it. Because it was kind of waste fabric and free fabric, I thought I'd just see how it took dye. Pretty well, I think. So you could use any yellowy, orangey, red, and don't worry if you don't have one that's a combination of all of them, because you can use thread, you can stitch onto it. So I'm just going to pick a nice bit. What would work well? Quite like this little section here. I know it's from the middle, and you will very rarely see me cutting into the middle of fabric, but I am kind of fussy cutting here. I'm looking for a piece that's going to work. I like it because Jupiter's got a red spot, and I think that would work quite well, and it's got the yellows and oranges. So just like before, rather than struggling with my paper scissors, I thought, let's get some fabric scissors in. I'm going to cut around, leaving a little bit of a border. I'm working this out as I'm going. I don't really have a plan. I've got a bit of an idea, but just like normal with winging it, I'm making it up as I'm going along. So what we want to do is I want to kind of pad this a little bit. So I've also got a little bit of my wadding that I've been using to back my panels each month. So I'm also going to cut around that just to make a little bit of padding on my shape. So this one I'm going to cut precisely. This is cotton wadding, so it's okay to cut with my scissors. So not leaving a border on this one. Just cutting it out to the actual size. We'll make all our shapes the same way. Right, please forgive me, I've skipped a bit because I had some sort of meltdown and kept attempting to do something, forgetting where I was up to in the process. So let me just talk you through what I've done. So I've snipped around the edge of both pieces just so that when we turn it over, we're going to get a nice circular shape and that fabric isn't going to all bunch up. So I've just made some snips around the edges of both, And hopefully you can see I've just tacked the padding to the back of this shape. We're just going to put our canvas to one side because what I want to do is some embroidery on this. And this one you can really please yourself. You can do whatever you like. Now I happen to have some leftover threads from an embroidery that I did and I wanted to use up. So I'm just going to get the colours that are appropriate. So I've got a sort of creamy white, orange, a reddish orange and a yellowy gold, and I thought they would work quite well. Let's start with this yellowy gold, and I'm going to take 2 strands, and you can do whatever you like on this. This is a total free-for-all. So I think I'm going to do some, I want to make it, I don't need it to look round, so what I'm going to do, I think, are work some lines kind of like this in my various shades just to add a little bit of detail. I think it might do some whipped back stitch. Let's do that on this one just because I think it will be fun. I've already gone wrong and started too close to the edge, so ideally you want to start a stitch length back and then work back, so that's how back stitch works. But I'm just going to do a straight stitch, then I'm going to come forward 1 stitch length and then go back to the end of that first stitch. I'm just going to do some lines of back stitch first of all. I don't want to cover up the fabric totally, so I want to be careful and space out my lines, but we can just do a bit of a stitch sampler. Just do your favourite stitches, whatever you enjoy stitching. You could do 2 strands, you could do 1 strand, it's entirely up to you. I made that stitch too short, so that's the only unpicking I'm going to do because this one's going wrong already. So keep hinting about making this more meaningful, and so thought while I'm just doing a bit of simple stitching I can explain to you what I mean by that. So planets are, as I'm sure you know, named after Roman gods from Roman mythology, and if you know anything about Roman mythology, they basically borrowed Greek mythology. So the ancient Greeks came first, created this sort of narrative about the way the world worked, and then when the Roman Empire rose up and took over, they basically just took Greece's cultural narrative and renamed everything with Roman names and just took it as their own. So Jupiter has a Greek equivalent, and the Greek equivalent of Jupiter is Zeus, which I'm sure you will have heard of. So Zeus was the head honcho. He was god of, he was like the chief god and was representative of thunder and lightning, and is often shown with a lightning bolt in artwork and things like that. And yeah, very petulant and changeable, prone to anger. And I thought we could go down a symbolic route because, you know, everybody had been so positive about the symbolism of the door and the meadow last month, and I thought that was really sort of landing with you all. But I didn't really like that symbolism. I didn't really want this to be all about temperamental ancient Greek and Roman gods who were all men and really quite angry all the time, because I'm under no illusion that 99.9% of the people that watch my videos are women, It's hard to make that resonate with women. I don't know. I don't identify with Zeus in any way. So I thought, wonder if there's a female counterpart, because let's look for the feminine, because there's always a feminine narrative somewhere. So I had a look at who the female equivalent was for Jupiter, and it is a character from Greek and Roman mythology called Juno. Now, what I do like about Greek and Roman myths is that the way that they interpreted the world, they gave themselves a benefactor. So it didn't matter what walk of life you were from, or what your job was, or what your trade was, or where you were up to in life, there was probably some sort of divine agent in their mythology that was on your side. So you have Diana, who's goddess of hunting, and you've got all the Jupiter was the god of the forge, so he was the one that people that made things out of metal look to and things like that. There's somebody for everybody. Not unlike, I suppose, the idea of patron saints in Western culture, particularly in the Catholic Church. There's a patron saint for pretty much everything, and whatever you believe about that, there's something really comforting in it, and I can totally understand why these ideas develop in a culture, because everyone needs to know this, they've got somebody on their side, don't they? And if you're a solo craftsperson working alone, really good to know that somebody's got your back. And so I thought I would look into these female equivalents and see what they represented or what they were symbolic of. So Juno, who is the female counterpart to Jupiter, is the goddess associated with love and marriage, and really like that. I like the fact that the colours associated with Jupiter are sort of fiery colours, and that maybe we could interpret that as being symbolic of passion or romance or whatever. And so I think we're going to make our planets symbolic. Now, doing this doesn't mean that you have to subscribe to either a Catholic worldview or an ancient Greek or Roman worldview. We're just using this as inspiration to get us thinking. So journals are supposed to be meditative, aren't they? They're supposed to be reflective. And so as you stitch your planet Jupiter, maybe it would be a nice idea to think about the people that you love, and particularly your life partner. Now, you may not be married, you might not have a life partner. That doesn't exclude you, because we all have people in our life that we love. So if you're not married or don't have a life partner, then think about your best friend or somebody that you are have a really strong bond with, and think about what you would like to see change or grow or develop in that relationship in the remaining 6 months of the year. And then maybe at the end of the year, we can look back and see what has happened. So we kind of, I'm not like suggesting that we're going to wish things into being, but it's really important to have intentions, I think, isn't it? It's really important to set ourselves some goals and intentions that we can then work towards, and we can change the way that we're living and thinking to bring some life somewhere and bring about some changes or growth or whatever, just like we did with our door. So I'm obviously thinking about my marriage, my husband Rick, and I'm not going to do an overshare of any kind here. So what I'm reflecting on will remain private, and I hope that's okay. But you know, I love my husband. I think we have a great marriage, but there's always room for growth, isn't there? There's always space for things to get better, or to change, or develop, or grow. So maybe you want to spend more quality time together. Maybe you want to find a hobby together. Maybe there's been something on your mind for ages that you need to have a meaningful conversation about. Maybe you feel like there's been a bit of drift and you want to do something about that. And this can apply to close friendships as well as like life partner relationships. So as you're stitching, have a think about what your intentions are. So I'm just going to keep stitching away at this, and then we'll come back, or I should show you the whipping part of this. So you can see I'm putting some back stitch lines, just super simple, very meditative stitching, and I'm going to use my fiery colours. You never know, maybe you want your marriage or life partnership to be a bit less fiery. Maybe it's been quite tense. It's, you know, whatever works for you. So when you whip, I'm coming up at the end of my line and I'm going to slide my needle just under the stitch. So I'm not going through the fabric, and I'm going from right to left through the stitch. And then I find my next stitch and I go right to left again. Next stitch, right to left. So we always go under the stitch, not through the fabric, and we always go in the same direction. And it makes a lovely little kind of candy stripe line, and it also covers a multitude of sins. So if your back stitching isn't particularly neat, the whipping will bring it into line, so it'll look far more regular and organised. This thread's quite sort of loosely twisted, so it feels bulkier than the normal threads that I stitch with. It's a bit fluffier as well. I don't think it's cotton, but I've got it, and let's use it up. So that's my first line, and I'm just going to mix these colours as I go down. So I'm going to stitch that, and then I'll come back and show you where we're up to. Okay, so here we go. Here's our planet. What we want to do now is attach these two together, and it's easier if you keep the pen on the outside. But what I'm going to do is just go around and finger press my tabs over back to the line like that until I get back to the beginning. And you can see on this one I've done a whipped back stitch around the outside, and that is actually going to make things a little bit easier for me. So I'm going to just turn back the first few tabs, and I'm just going to line up the outside like that. I've threaded up a single strand of orange thread and put a knot in the end. I'm going to come up inside, so I've just gone through inside. I'm just doing a ladder stitch. You can see it's pretty invisible there, and to do a ladder stitch, what we're going to do is work on that blue pen line. I want to fold in the tabs, and I've got my thread on the canvas there. What I want to do is hop horizontally across to my orange fabric, my tie-dye fabric, slide a little way along the blue line inside the fold, pull through, and then hop back to my canvas, slide along the blue line, along the fold, and then I'm hopping back to the tie-dye fabric, slide along the line, and when I pull, that closes up and the stitches become invisible. Better to not do too many stitches before you pull it closed, because otherwise there's just too many twists and turns for the thread to be able to cope. You're more likely to break your thread than you are to close the gap. And if you want to, you could go around and wonder clip all this in place before you start stitching. Probably save some time, and it certainly makes it more manageable. Okay, so there's my little Jupiter. How cute is that? Love it. So I'm going to bring back in my backing piece, and we're going to just position it on there, and I want another piece of thread. And what we're going to do is, let's just pin that in place for a minute. You can arrange it whatever way you like. I'm going to do it with horizontal lines, but you do vertical if you wanted to. Keeping my lines horizontal. I'm just going to pop a pin to hold it in place. And I'm going to come up from the back at about 2 o'clock. Like that. And you can do the ladder stitch again, that would work fine, or you can just do like an applique stitch. Either one will work. And we're just going to attach it to the background. So I think I'm going to do applique stitch and just catch that back fabric. You can just manipulate it a little bit to find your fabric. Finding it easier to do it in 2 motions this time, because just trying to manage the number of layers. And I want it to be secure, because this is going to be like a little pocket. So I want it to go all the way through to the very back. Keeping my stitches about 1/8 of an inch apart, just to make sure that it's well attached. So as you've been stitching your planet, I hope you've been having a think about what your intentions are, because we're going to make a record and store it inside the little pocket. That's what we're going to do. And then we can come back if we want to at the end of the year or this time next year and check up on ourselves and see how we're progressing towards those intentions. So kind of making a record, putting it down in writing, kind of holds ourselves accountable. So it's a good way, if you really are resolved to do something, it's a good way of holding yourself to account. Because we can all dream up all manner of things, can't we? But while it remains just a thought or an idea, there's nothing sort of motivating us or making us act on intentions, and so making a record, actually putting it in writing, makes it a little bit more definitive, and it gives us something to look back at to check progress. We can see how we're progressing towards whatever intentions we've made. So we're going to write ourselves a little note in a minute and pop it in the pocket. There we go. So it doesn't look like there's a pocket there, but there is. So I can hide something in there. I've got some nice handmade paper here. I'm not going to show you what I'm going to write, but I've got a nice pen to do with a firmer surface. 2 ticks. Let's get my notebook, and I'm going to write Juno, love and marriage, and then I'm going to write my intention just underneath that, cut it off and fold it up and pop it in my pocket. There we go. So I've chosen red paper because it's in line with the planet and is similar to the colour scheme of the planet. I didn't have any yellow or orange, so I've got my little note to self, and that gets tucked inside, and you can leave it protruding if you want to, just as a reminder that it's there. Maybe I'll do that for the purposes of the video, just as a little reminder that it's there, or you can tuck it away completely. So that's my intention for love and marriage. Now I've also got some little strips of my linen fabric. You might remember this from back in February. These are just linen offcuts, and if you want to, I think I'm going to do this. I've got my stamp pad here, my little alphabet stamps. You can make a little, I've made my little Jupiter label, and I can trim that down like that and stitch it on. Right, so the rest won't be quite so lengthy, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the planet to help you get started. So Mercury comes next. Now Mercury is grey blue, and back in January we did some watercolour painting on fabric to create our watery sky, and I thought that would be perfect for Mercury. So let's make a start. I want a section, done Jupiter, here we go, we've got Mercury. I want a section that's kind of splodgy. I think I'm going to go with that one. So my turning isn't massive, but I think it will do. And I'm going to stitch while it's still on the fabric, so I'm not going to cut it out because this one's quite small. So I often find with smaller pieces, if you give yourself a bit more fabric to work with, that's a bit better. And I've got a grey, maybe this one's better, got a sort of grey blue variegated thread here, so let's go with that one. Now Mercury is the messenger of the gods. That was what Mercury represented. So he was in charge of messages. The Greek version is Hermes. So if you know the company Every, they used to be called Hermes. And the female equivalent is a goddess called Iris, and her symbol is actually the rainbow, and she's often pictured with a peacock. Oh, what stitching to do? Maybe I just do seed stitch. I need a bit of padding, don't I? That's why it's not feeling quite right. So let's get my Mercury template back. So, Iris, all about communication. So, while you're stitching your planet Mercury, have a think about people you want to connect with. It's all about communication, and I'm going to challenge us to set an intention of connecting with somebody that we have disconnected with. So this might be a friend that you haven't seen for a long time, or a relative that you haven't heard from, or somebody that you just drifted apart from. So maybe you were really great friends and you still know each other, but you have drifted apart, or you haven't spent as much time together as possible as you might have done over the last little while. Maybe it's somebody that you haven't heard from or seen in years. So I've lost touch with many friends in my life for lots of different reasons, and sometimes it's harder, isn't it, to keep friendships going than it is to let them drift. It's always harder. So I can already think, even as I'm sewing now and chatting, I can think of two friends in particular that I really want to get back in touch with, who I've not seen or heard from for years. And one of them I actually did try and get back in touch with a couple of years ago, and she messaged me back, and then life got in the way and time passed, and then I got to that point. If you've ever done this, do let me know in the comments that I'm not alone. It got to that point where too much time had passed, and then it became embarrassing, and so I never replied, and now I feel like I've created an awkwardness that wasn't there. But I'm absolutely confident in my head. I'm absolutely confident that she would want to hear from me, and it wouldn't matter that I messed it up the first time around. Yeah, so I can think of people that I probably want to make contact with before the end of this month, and maybe in the last video I will let you know how I've got on. So it's hard for me. I'm really shy. I am really shy, and I know it seems odd that I spent 20 years in a classroom in front of an audience and now I do YouTube videos. But I am an incredibly shy person, and just put on a really good show of being socially confident, and I'm really not. So there's always doubt in my mind when I'm making contact with people or meeting up with people that I haven't seen for a long time or whatever. But um, I'm just going to choose to believe that it's the same for everyone. And I'm just going to go for it. So I will catch you up in the last video in this month's project and let you know if I've done it and what's happened. And I figure I'm telling myself this now. I figure that the worst that can happen is that I don't get a reply. And if I don't get a reply, then I'm no worse off, am I? Because we're not in contact now. So if I don't get a reply, I'm no worse off. And if I do get a reply, then that would be fabulous, wouldn't it? I've made contact with 3 people that were hugely important to me in my life, who I've just lost touch with. So when I come to write my little note to self, I'm going to write down the names of these 3 people that I want to open lines of communication with again, or I want to message. So who are you going to message, I wonder? And if you are able, if it's not too personal, it doesn't make you too vulnerable, put in the comments how it went. I'd love to hear. So there we go. So that's my seed stitch almost done. I'm going to make up my planet just like I did with Jupiter and stitch it on, and I'll show you when it's in place. So I've added my planet and my little label. I've just stitched that in some blue thread. I'm really liking this whipped back stitch around the outside edge, by the way. I think I'm going to do that on all of them. So for this one, I'm going to write Iris, Messengers, and Communication. And then I'm going to write the names of the 3 people I am going to get back in contact with, or attempt to, over the month, and then I will pop it inside. Teeny tiny little note, look, and in it goes. There's my Mercury. Right, so we're going to focus on Uranus or Uranus, and that is a sky blue planet. So I've got a little bit of this blue spot fabric here, and I've already drawn on my circle. Now, Uranus is the sky god. He's the sort of sky father. That's how he was known in Roman mythology. And the female counterpart for Uranus is a character called Gaia. Now, she is known as the ancestral mother or Mother Earth, and she's often associated with earth imagery. So even though we've got a sort of blue shade to our fabric, I thought we could go with some more organic leafy stitching over this, so that's how we're going to play it. Now, I thought we could take this in one of 2 directions. So the most obvious direction is to, as we're stitching, think about our role as mothers. So if you are a mother or a grandmother, maybe have a ponder about your intentions in that role. So are there any ways that you want to grow or alter the way that you parent or mother your children? If your children are grown up and have moved away and maybe got partners of their own, is there something around that that you need to set some intentions with? Or if you are now a grandmother, maybe you want to have a think about the way that you are grandmothering, and maybe reflect on the way that you were a mother and the way that you want to be more or different as a grandmother. So we could take it in that direction. I'm very aware that some of you may not be mothers, and so you could take it down the earth route if you wanted to. So is there something to do with the earth or the climate or the planet that you want to do more of? Maybe you want to get more in touch with nature, spend more time in the natural world. Maybe you want to do something to help the environment, something like that. So you could either think about, as you're stitching, your function and role and identity as a mother, or your function and role in relationship with the earth. So, or you could do a bit of both, it's entirely up to you. So I thought we'd do some feather stitch on this because it sort of, we used it on our door panel last month to suggest leaves and climbing plants, and I think it's a really organic looking stitch. So I thought I'd do some lines of feather stitch. Now, if you're not sure about feather stitch, it's very much like fly stitch and blanket stitch. We make a little loop, catch that loop, and we just rock side to side. If you need a more detailed explanation of what I'm doing, I do have stitch tutorial videos, and I will link one of those at the top of the screen so that you can go and have a look at that if you want to. But you start at the top of your line, rock backwards and forwards, making these interlocking V's, and it is always better to end your line of stitching at the bottom rather than trying to work out how to go back up. So I'm just going to put in a last stitch here now that I'm at the bottom of my circle. I'm going to take my thread over that loop at the bottom, and I'm going to finish it off on the back, and then I'll start a new line of stitching at the top. And I'm going to overlap some of these. I'm using an Anchor pearl cotton here. It's a variegated thread. I think it's 8 weight. So there are a number of areas under this planet that I can have a think about in terms of my intentions. So there's quite a big gap between my children, and my daughter's just about to, she's an adolescent now, so she's just on that bridge between childhood and adulthood. And so I'm thinking quite a lot about how to help her navigate that very rocky road. And my son is about to turn 21, so he's kind of a grown up now, and that obviously has implications for our interactions and where I fit into his life. There's also lots of things to do with planet Earth that are on my mind, so thinking about my impacts on the planet. But actually, from my perspective, there's a lot more that I need to think about in terms of my connection with nature, because it's very easy for me to go days without really going outside. And I love being outside, I love being surrounded by nature. And so I'm sure that some of my intentions are going to be rooted in getting much more connected and into nature more often, and maybe doing more to look after the environment that's around me. So that's my stitching so far. I'm just going to add lots more stitching and sort of fill up that circular space, and then I'm going to make it up in the same way that I've made up the other planets, cutting it out, making my snips. And here you've got it attached to the background with my little label, and I'm just writing my intentions down. So I'm going to write Gaia and Earth Mother, just to help me remember the point of this planet and what the focus of our intentions is. And then I'm going to put down some of my intentions, fold it up, and I've been a bit sneaky here because the other two open at the top, but this one I've left the opening at the side, so I wanted to throw off any intruders. So that is how our panel is looking so far, and I've got to be honest, I'm absolutely loving this. You know what I'm going to say, don't you? I think it's my favourite one so far. Because it always is. It's always my favourite one so far. But I think it's looking really quirky and really fun. I love the fact that they're padded. If I could just tip it to the side, you can see that they're sitting off the surface really nicely. And I like the way these sort of more muted tones are bringing down that vibrant background a little bit and just making it a little bit more gentle. So I like the way it's fraying up nicely as well as I'm working on it. So just looking a little bit more ragged and a little bit more natural looking. So that's where we're going to leave it this week. We're going to do our remaining 3 planets next week, and then we're going to work on our border and our background. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope that you've got some great intentions tucked away underneath your planets in your planet pockets that will help you move forward more intentionally through this month. I love these little secret messages that are hidden away. So we're aligning planets and we're aligning our intentions with the things that we want to see grow and develop in our lives. So hope you've enjoyed that as much as I have. Do share your planets at hashtag FSH Winging It 24, and you can also share them in our Facebook group, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. Don't forget, if you want to join that group, don't forget to agree to the group rules, and then I can let you straight in without any problems. So have a great week. If you finish your planets and you want to keep stitching, I will put a video here, and I'll put a link to the playlist with all of our Winging It 2024 videos down here. I will see you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.